Best ever listeners, how you doing? Welcome to the best real estate investing advice ever show. I'm Joe Fairless. This is the world's longest running daily real estate investing podcast where we only talk about the best advice ever. We don't get into any of that fluffy stuff. And we got, with us, Theo Hicks, like we always do. And let's dive right into it.
Yep. So I did the interviews last week. So I'm going to go over some of the lessons I learned from 3 of those interviews. First one was really interesting. Alex Talcott, really smart guy. He's actually he does a lot. So he's a manager of a financial planning company. He actually teaches a full-time course load at business school, and he also told me a few other things that he did. One of them being he likes to go to DC and just sit in on congressional hearings and things like that, just to learn and absorb information from them. So really smart guy. And I was asking him some questions just because I figured financial planning, since obviously the types of people he's attracting are people who are passive investors. I kind of looked at it through that lens. And one thing he mentioned is that he, when he became interested in investing himself, he knew that he needed to find the person that was in the top of the industry to learn from them and absorb knowledge from them. And he did so. They found the top lawyer and investor. He's a lawyer, as they mentioned why he likes to talk to lawyers for these things. But he mentioned that obviously it's really difficult to find that top person in the industry. Obviously it's important and very helpful, but it's not easy, especially if you're someone who's newer. Right. So this guy right here had an instant connection because they're both lawyers. And so I asked him, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to connect with that top person in the industry? And his response was interesting. Well, I mean, he at first he said just email him, just because he likely he knows the person. But the whole point was that you want to find someone. You want to figure out how many degrees of separation you are from that person, and find someone that knows them, or find someone that knows someone that knows them, and kind of however long that train needs to be in order to essentially the person that mentions you to that person knows them already, and they know them, they trust him. So like I was gonna say, like, Joe, if let's say for example you were looking to hire a new employee, would you, and then you had 2 candidates that were completely the same, the only difference was Frank or I brought him to you, as opposed to he just kind of randomly found you, which one would you likely go with more?
Right. The person who knows mutual friends or colleagues.
Exactly. So I thought that was really interesting. And so the whole idea is if you want to get in contact with someone, another strategy, rather than just reaching out and proactively adding value, is to reach out to someone that relatively well, and have them kind of softly introduce you over email or something like that.
One book that comes to mind as a added resource to this topic is How to Be a Power Connector by Judy Robinette. And I interviewed Judy long time ago. Judy, Joe. Let's see if it comes up. Oh, wow. Yeah. Episode 79. I knew it was a long time ago. How to Meet Mark Cuban. It says something like that on the title. Episode 79. Yes, 79. I interviewed her, and she talks about during that interview, when you want to meet someone, don't go straight to the person. Instead, find a way that you can introduce someone to that person that adds value or solves a problem for whatever they're trying to solve. So, for example, in her Mark Cuban example, I forget what Mark was looking for at a particular time, but she talks about it in the interview. But she found someone who was in that field, and she somehow connected the dots. I forget the exact how it transpired, but she was able to introduces people to people she eventually wants to get to know. So she adds value to their life by connecting them, and then she's in the mix within that circle too, as a result of it. And you got to be careful with that, because people will introduce me to other people who, yeah, I'm all about building relationships, but yeah, I only have a certain amount of time in my day, and so does everyone else. Everyone has a certain amount of time in their day. So if you're proactively introducing someone to a person, make sure that that introduction is relevant and that they really are seeking that type of introduction, because if not, it will have the opposite effect of what you intend. You'll actually turn the person off because they're like, oh man, you just did an introduction to someone who I'm sure they're a great person, but it's just not relevant for me at this point in time or perhaps ever. And now it's taking more of my time to remedy what you've created versus you solving a problem in their life.
Yeah, it's basically the more you become known as that power influencer, the more people, and the closer you are to people that people want to know, the more contact you're going to get. So yeah, you have to be smart about it, and you can't just every single time someone emails you say, "Hey, I met this really good guy.
Right.
Do a meet him and talk to him." I mean, I get people get asking me to introduce them to you all the time. I just don't understand. And as you can tell, I rarely ever do it. So
I don't think you've ever introduced anyone.
I did it one time.
You did it once? Okay.
I did it one time. Yeah. All right. So the next one was just an interesting conversation, just because I hadn't talked to anyone that was in this industry before. So she specializes in legally compliant cannabis properties. So she doesn't invest in them. She's just like a broker that people who are interested in doing it and have a property that they want to sell or rezone or whatever, she helps them out with that. And I'm just asking her from an investment standpoint, what are some of the risks? And since cannabis isn't federally legal, the main hurdle is that you can't get any loans on any of the property. So there's no banking system set up for cannabis properties. So according to her, it sounds like some savvy investors are trying to set up some private banking around it.
I figured.
Because there's probably a huge demand for that. Because you mentioned that the returns are, I mean, you can lease a property for basically double per dollar per square foot, just because of it being zoned already for cannabis use. So I just thought that was interesting. Then we also talked about what was her best advice for someone who wanted to get into the industry, and that really applies to any investor. And she was saying that whenever you're presented with a deal or an idea or a business partner or really anything, make sure you are doing your due diligence and getting the full story on that person. So in this particular example for the cannabis industry, the idea is that I own a property and someone wants to lease my property from me. And so since I can't look at their bank statements or anything like that or tax records because they don't exist, you have to kind of be savvy about doing your due diligence because there really aren't any financial documents to track. So I thought that was interesting because for most if I'm buying an apartment, I could pretty easily get my hands on the rent roll and the T12 and know exactly what how the property performed financially from a historical standpoint, where it's for this you just can't because it doesn't exist.
It is prudent advice to do your due diligence when you're doing a transaction with a drug dealer. I agree with that.
There you go. And then the last person I talked, not the last person I talked to, but the last lesson that I learned was from Brad Stevens. He has a company that it's called Outsource Access, and they provide entrepreneurs and commercial real estate agents with VAs.
He's also the coach of the Celtics, I think. I think that guy's name's Brad Stevens.
The name does sound familiar.
Used to coach at Butler.
So in that episode, we essentially go over the blueprint for how to hire a VA. I'm not going to talk about that right now just because it would take too long. But there were 2 points that he made that I thought were interesting that I didn't know. Number one was I didn't know why a lot of VAs were from the Philippines, and he explained that to me. And he said that so apparently in the Philippines, English is a second language, and they have their American their school system is a very Americanized, and it's a very Americanized country in general, and so it's very very easy to work with. You can communicate with them. They have an idea of the American culture. And then he said that the minimum wage, there's actually $1 to $1.50, in American dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually, and that's obviously why people use them, because they're English second language, very Americanized, and you can pay them a lot less than you pay a VA in America. And then we talked about when would be the ideal time to hire a VA, right? Because you most likely don't want to just decide that I'm going to start a business and then tomorrow get a VA. And so I just asked him, hey, when do you hire one? And I mean, his answer is pretty obvious, but it's still interesting. And basically he said that everything in life comes down to a return on investment. So it's how you value your time. So it kind of reminded me of that $1, $10, $100, $1,000, $10,000
Right.
activity we talked about, and how you essentially what you want to do is you want to do that, figure out what tasks you're doing that are in the lower end range, so the $10 an hour range, $100 an hour range, depending on what you do. And then once you get to the point where your time is worth more than $10 an hour, then you want to hire out that VA.
I like it.
Another way to look at it was, as from a commercial real estate investor, for a commercial real estate agent, he would say, okay, well, let's say it costs you $1,400 a month for a VA. That's how much outsourced access charges. And let's say you close on one extra deal per year because of that, and you make $20,000. Well, you've already paid for that VA for the year. So as long as you close on one extra deal, that VA, then it's worth the time.
And I have on my notebook right here to discuss my assessment of, I'm calling it major versus minor time analysis. With Jim Rome talks about it being major versus minor time, or what we talked about on during a conversation a couple months ago was that $10 exercise, because I committed to doing it, and I said it wouldn't be immediately, but it'd be in the next couple months, and I still have it written down. So I will be assessing a week of my time and determining how much was major versus how much was minor time, and then just sharing the results and things that I learned.
All right, so those are the lessons I learned from the interviews last week. Obviously, as Joe says when he does this, I learned a lot more than just that, but those are the three ones I thought were the most interesting. All right, moving on to the trivia question. So this is the month of Jeopardy. So all of the, so I'm going to read the answer, and then you had to guess what is blank. So last week's trivia question was the city where 63% of the people who are searching for a place to rent are from outside the city, which is the highest percent of any city in the country. And then I can't remember what Joe
I didn't
said.
hear a word you said. I just heard the voice you used. That's all.
I've been working on that all week, Joe. And by your reaction, I think I did a good job. So the answer was, what is Tampa, Florida? So if you answer that correctly, the first person to answer that correctly gets that free copy of our first book. This week is the U.S. state that is home to the two cities that had the lowest cost of living. So what state has the two cities that are at the bottom of the cost of living chart?
Oh, that's going to be, I'm going to go Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Yep.
All right, so again, first person to get this correctly, and you can submit your answer either in the comments of the YouTube section below if you're watching this on video, or you can submit your answer to info@joefairless.com if you're listening on the podcast, and you'll receive a copy of our first book. And then lastly, we're going to discuss the apartment syndication resource of the week. So I believe next week we're going to be finishing off series number 20. And that's talking about how to asset manage a deal. So we've got a lot of episodes, a lot of series to listen to. The actual free document we're going to talk about this week is all the way back in the series number 9, where we talked about how to raise capital from passive investors. If you want to start that series, it is episode 1562 is the first episode, and it's an 8-part series. And for that series, the free document we gave away was a money raising tracker. So me and Joe have talked about it on the podcast before, but this document will allow you to track obviously who is investing in your deals, who is a prospective investor, and then all of the key performance indicators, the KPIs, the important metrics that you're going to want to track of those investors. So how much money they're investing, where they live, how you met them, and the entire idea of this money raising tracker, besides obviously knowing who your investors are, is to determine how you're finding these investors, so you know how to focus your time. So you can it allows you to do or walk you through an exercise that lets you visually see, based off of how you're finding these investors, where are you finding the majority of them, and where are you finding not so many of them. And it's like it's a word cloud exercise where the highest number of investors will be the biggest word. You can figure out what that is and then focus your time on growing that source.
Very valuable document and very valuable content for anyone looking to bring on investors to their business. Best ever listeners, enjoyed our conversation. Hope you got a lot of value from it, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right.